Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of A Year in Cards at twopiesindabucket.com. This is class 7 for July, and we're making some cards with repetition. And repetition is one of the design elements that works really well for really small stamps or really small punches or anything like that that you might have in your crafting stash that are otherwise kind of really hard to use. For the first card, we're going to be using some pattern paper from Basic Gray. This is the Oliver 6x6 pad. And I'm also going to be using this punch here, and it's from Martha Stewart Crafts. This is the 3-in-1 butterfly punch. And I'm going to be using these two small butterflies at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and set the punch aside for a minute here, and we're going to work on the base of the card. And I just have some gray cardstock here, and I'm going to cover the entire front of the card with this striped pattern paper, but I want it diagonally, and so I'm going to have to only have it touch these outside corners. That's all it's really going to show, with the card that I planned, so it works out. So I'm just placing it on here diagonally and then turning the card over and tracing around the edges so that I can cut the paper for the front of the card. And if you hear me talking and I'm talking a little bit funny, it's because my cat was meowing a lot while I was filming, and so I'm doing a voiceover this time. And I'm holding him on my lap because I think he just needed attention. But anyway, so I've got the green cardstock here. It's just cut a little bit smaller than the front of the card, and I've punched the one corner. And we're going to be kind of assembling the rest of the card on the green paper and then putting it onto the stripe. So I'm punching out some butterflies, and I'm going to just punch it out from some of the different patterns. And then I'll just set the butterflies aside. I'm arranging them on the card in a repeating pattern. So you've got 8 butterflies, and I'm also using this ruler to help me get the butterflies on straight. So I'm just using a pencil and kind of tracing some lines on there to help me get it on there straight. Hi, Teddy. Hi. Okay, and then I'm attaching the butterflies with some mini glue dots. And I'm rolling up the mini glue dot and then placing it on the back of the butterfly. This also makes it stand up a little bit away from the card because it's a little bit thicker. Just erase that, the pencil lines I made earlier. So now I'm using the Ink-a-Dink-a-Doo embossing pen. And I'm just writing out "Love You" really quickly. And then I'm taking some white embossing pattern. I had it standing by so that I could get the embossing pattern on there really quickly. Just kind of placing it on there, and then I'll be shaking off the excess. And I'll heat it with a heat gun. This just makes the white stand out really, really well. Going around the edges with a white gel pen, doing some kind of faux stitching. That's just because the edge, this card seemed really, really simple and a lot of negative blank space was on it. And I wanted to give the edge a little bit of definition. So I'm just adhering that straight onto the card, and that finishes card number 1. And we'll head straight into card number 2. I'm using some pattern paper from that same paper pack, just this stripe and this polka dot, and also some vellum, and I'm using the same color cardstock as I did on the first card as well. Starting out by cutting off one side of the card front so there's only 3 inches left, and then applying a little strip of glue. I'm using Tombow Mono Multi-Glue, and then putting the vellum straight on, and I'm lining up the edge, the bottom, the side edges or whatever of the vellum with the other side of the card so I get the correct size of card. Then I'm adhering the pattern paper over top. It sort of sandwiches the vellum in between the cardstock and the pattern paper so you don't see any glue marks. And I'm doing the same thing at the bottom with the pattern paper, the polka dot. And then as soon as I have that on there, I will turn over the front of the card, and we'll put on the black cardstock with a little bit of glue. And what I discovered with this glue was with vellum, if you're adhering vellum onto white, or the underside or the back side of pattern paper, if it's only one-sided, it doesn't even show. It looks really, really good. Okay, so I rounded the corners on the end on the front card front as well, and now this is where the repetition comes in. I've got this heart stamp from Maya Road, and I'm using some charcoal color block fluid ink, and I'm just going to stamp this heart over and over at the bottom on top of the vellum. And the interesting thing with chalk ink is that it goes onto vellum really well. It doesn't slide around or anything like most normal inks do. But it does take quite a bit of time to dry. So while it was drying, I was really careful and tied this ribbon around the card front. And I kind of just tried to stay away from that area until it had a little bit of time to dry. So I'm just sliding it down the ribbon. And the bow didn't want to stay where I wanted it to. So I decided to use a little bit of adhesive. I'm using a mini glue dot. And I'm using my scissors to kind of place the mini glue dot underneath the bow. Manny, stop crawling around my lap. He's crawling all over everywhere, but at least he's not meowing. So I'm rubbing some pattern paper with a fabric dryer sheet, and this is to prep it for embossing. And that just helps it so that the embossing powder doesn't stick to areas I don't want it to. Now I've stamped this hello stamp from Ink and Inkadoo in some Versamark ink, and then I put white embossing powder on it and then heated it up and adhered it to the front of the card. And that pretty much finishes up card number 2, and we'll head straight into card number 3. The third card is showing how to do repetition with 2 different stamps. I'm using this stamp set called This Way from Sassafras, and I'm going to be using 2 different arrow stamps. And this is a really small card. It's just a 3x3 card, and it's just to show you that you can use repetition to kind of create a background for your card. So I'm going to be using both stamps. I put one on each block, and I'm kind of alternating between the 2, which stamp I use, or maybe use going to the other side of the card. Kind of experimenting with different directions that the arrows can go. Okay, so I finished stamping all the arrows, and now I've cut just a really thin strip of white cardstock, and I'm using a black pen to write, "You are here in my heart always," but instead of having the writing out the word heart, I'm punching out a heart out of some pattern paper, same pattern paper from that 6x6 pad, and then placing the heart and then writing always in. And that's just so I can get the placement of always just exactly where I want it. So I'll use some tape runner adhesive just to adhere this down to the card. I'm getting it lined up. That thud was my cat playing with ribbon now. He is really on one tonight. I think we've got some weather coming in, so he's kind of going crazy. Okay, so I put some dimensional adhesive on the back of the heart, and I'm going to round the corners as a final touch. And that finishes up the third card. Hope you enjoyed this month's class, and please join us over at twopieceinabucket.com on the message boards. If you have any questions, or you can show us what you've been working on and upload it to the twopieceinabucket.com gallery. Thanks so much, and I'll catch you guys next time.